Cersei Lannister sat on the Iron Throne believing she'd finally outsmarted everyone. She'd destroyed her enemies, seized the crown, and even managed to impress the Iron Bank of Braavos with a massive debt repayment. She thought she was securing her power. What she actually did was seal her own doom, because Cersei, for all her cunning and ruthlessness, had one fatal flaw. She was brilliant at short-term victories and catastrophically bad at long-term strategy, and her decision to pay off the Iron Bank in full might be the perfect example of how her need to prove herself superior destroyed everything she'd worked for. This is the story of how Cersei Lannister's greatest triumph became her biggest mistake, how the woman who thought she was playing chess was actually just knocking over pieces, and how the most powerful financial institution in the world played her like a fiddle while she congratulated herself on her own genius. First off, the debt that wasn't what it seemed. In season 7, Cersei makes a bold move. She tells Tywin, representative of the Iron Bank of Braavos, that she'll repay the entire debt the crown owes to the bank, not in installments over years, not gradually, all of it immediately. On the surface, this sounds smart. It puts her in good standing with the most powerful financial institution in the known world. It proves she's a reliable partner. It shows strength. But here's what Cersei doesn't understand or chooses to ignore. That debt wasn't what she thought it was. The Iron Throne did owe the Iron Bank money, that's true, but the bulk of what Cersei was repaying wasn't borrowed directly by Robert Baratheon or his successors. It was borrowed by Tywin Lannister, who then loaned it to the crown. In the books, the Lannisters get their wealth from gold mines beneath Casterly Rock, but the show reveals something darker. Those mines stopped producing gold years ago. Tywin had been borrowing from the Iron Bank to maintain the illusion of Lannister wealth and using that borrowed gold to fund the crown. So when Cersei pays off the debt in full, she's not just clearing the crown's obligations, she's consolidating what's left of the supposed Lannister fortune with the crown's assets. She's betting everything on her ability to remain in power, and she's doing it at the worst possible time. So what about the Iron Bank's true power? To understand why this is such a catastrophic mistake, you need to understand what the Iron Bank actually is. The Iron Bank of Braavos isn't just a lender. It's arguably the most powerful entity in the entire world of Ice and Fire. They bankroll wars, they topple kings, they decide which rulers succeed and which ones fail. One of the core themes of Game of Thrones is that power resides where men believe it resides, and everyone in this world believes the Iron Bank holds real power, because they do. The bank has a simple philosophy. They always get their money back. If you borrow from them and don't pay, they'll fund your enemies until you're overthrown and replaced with someone who will pay. They've done it before, they'll do it again. This gives them enormous leverage, but that leverage only exists as long as someone owes them money. What about Tywin? Why did he never pay off his debts? When Tycho Nestoris mentions that Tywin Lannister never managed to pay off his own considerable debts, Cersei hears it as a compliment. She thinks she's finally done something her father couldn't. But Tywin wasn't stupid. He was arguably the smartest political mind in Westeros, but there's a reason he never paid off those debts in full. As long as the Lannisters owed the Iron Bank massive amounts of money, the bank had a vested interest in keeping them in power. If the Lannisters fell, the bank lost its investment, so the bank would do whatever necessary to ensure Lannister success. It was the ultimate insurance policy. The Lannisters weren't just borrowers, they were too big to fail. Tywin understood this. He maintained that debt deliberately, turning what looked like a weakness into a source of strength. The Iron Bank wasn't just his lender, they were his unwilling allies, forced by their own financial interests to support his cause. I don't think the Iron Bank has ever had a debt of this magnitude repaid in a single installment. I always considered your father a very effective and efficient man, but you appear to be redefining those terms entirely. That quote sounds like he's praising her, but listen closer. It could just as easily be sarcasm. He's pointing out that Tywin, the efficient man, never did what Cersei just did, and there was probably a very good reason for that. So what is the bargaining chip that she just threw away? By paying off the debt in full, Cersei eliminated the Iron Bank's only motivation for continued support. Well, before, if the bank turned against Cersei while she still owed them money, they'd be writing off their investment as a complete loss. They'd have to start over with whoever replaced her, hoping that person would be willing to repay debts they didn't personally incur. And that's a huge financial risk. It's much safer to keep supporting the person who owes you money until they've paid it all back. But now the debt is settled. The bank's investment has paid off. They're free to reassess which side they want to support without worrying about losing their money. Cersei thought she was proving her reliability. What she actually did was remove the one thing forcing the bank to stay loyal to her. So what was the threat that she didn't hear? Well, Tycho Nestoris is a professional. He's polite, measured, diplomatic, but if you listen carefully to his conversation with Cersei, he's not actually promising her anything. Perhaps we could be of assistance in some current venture. Perhaps, not we will, just perhaps. He also said, you can count on the Iron Bank's support as long as the gold arrives. As soon as, not forever after, just as soon as the transaction is complete. And then there's the most important line, when he said, we don't make bets. We invest in endeavors we deem likely to be successful. Now that's not a compliment, that's a warning. The Iron Bank will support whoever they think will win, and once Cersei's debt is paid, they're free to reassess who that is. But Cersei hears this as a validation. The bank thinks she'll be successful, so they're supporting her. But what Tycho is actually saying is, we support likely winners, and if you stop looking like a winner, we'll find someone else. It's a veiled threat, and Cersei is too arrogant to hear it. So what about the far better investment waiting across the water? So if the Iron Bank is free to support whoever they want, who would they choose? On one side, you have Cersei Lannister. She's surrounded by enemies, she's alienated most of her former allies, she's sitting in a city that's about to face a brutal winter with limited food supplies, her only supporters are her brother lover, and a mercenary fleet led by a psychopath. On the other hand, you have Daenerys Targaryen. She just arrived in Westeros with 3 dragons, the largest enemy ever assembled, and the support of multiple great houses. She's young, she's charismatic, and she's winning. And as Tycho himself said, they invest in endeavors likely to be successful. Cersei tries to argue against Daenerys by pointing out that she frees slaves and leads revolutionaries, suggesting these people don't pay their debts. But this argument is laughably weak when you remember the Iron Bank is located in Braavos, a city literally founded by freed slaves. The bank doesn't care about ideology, they only care about profit, and Daenerys looks like a much safer investment than Cersei. Now that Cersei's paid off her debt, there's nothing stopping the bank from switching sides. So what about the pattern of short-term thinking? If this turns out to be a mistake, it wouldn't be Cersei's first. In fact, her entire reign is defined by decisions that work in the short term, but destroy her in the long run. She marries Joffrey to Marguerite Tyrell to secure an alliance. This gives the Tyrells so much power that Cersei eventually has to blow up Sept of Baelor to get rid of them, killing hundreds and turning the faith against her. She fires Barristan Selmy from the Kingsguard to install her own people. Barristan goes straight to Daenerys and becomes one of her most valuable advisors. She arms the faith militant to use them against the Tyrells. They immediately turn on her and imprison her. She makes an alliance with Euron Greyjoy, giving a sadistic maniac control of the seas and access to her bed. And now she's agreed to a truce with Daenerys and Jon Snow, planning to betray them the moment they march north to fight the army of the dead. Every single one of these decisions makes sense in the moment. Every single one creates massive problems later. Cersei is exceptionally good at winning today's battles while losing tomorrow's war, and paying off the Iron Bank fits that pattern exactly. So what about the Casterly Rock problem? Here's what makes Cersei's situation even worse. She doesn't actually have the resources to back up her power play. As mentioned earlier, the gold mines beneath Casterly Rock have run dry. The Lannister fortune is a myth maintained through borrowed money, and Cersei just spent all of that money paying off the Iron Bank. So what happens when she needs more funds? Where does that money come from? She could borrow from the Iron Bank again, but only if they still see her as a worthwhile investment. And given that Daenerys Targaryen just showed up with dragons, that's looking increasingly unlikely. Cersei has made a massive power grab. She crowned herself queen, she's about to betray the largest military coalition ever assembled in Westeros, she's surrounded by enemies on all her sides. This is quite possibly the worst time in her life to run out of money. So what about the Golden Company miscalculation? Well, incredibly, Cersei makes things even worse. Having just paid off all her debts and eliminated her financial cushion, Cersei immediately spends money she doesn't have. She sends Euron to help the Golden Company, the most expensive and renowned mercenary group in Essos. This might sound like a smart move. She needs soldiers and the Golden Company are the best, but there are several massive problems with this decision. First, she's hiring them just as winter arrives in King's Landing. That means food shortages are coming. The city will be full of starving, desperate people, and Cersei is spending her money on soldiers instead of grain. She's about to have an army she can't feed in a city full of people she can't feed. That's just a recipe for disaster. And secondly, which is crucial, Cersei isn't the one hiring the Golden Company. Euron is. The Golden Company's reputation is built on always honoring their contracts, but the contract isn't with Cersei, it's with whoever paid them, and Cersei sent Euron to do the paying. That means the Golden Company is technically beholden to Euron, and not Cersei. If Euron decides he doesn't like how Cersei is running things, he can take away his 20,000 soldiers and leave. Or worse, he can turn them against her. Basically, Cersei just handed Euron Greyjoy, a violent psychopath who enjoys torturing women, command of the most powerful mercenary army in the world. So what about the Golden Company's true allegiance? So there's an even bigger problem with the Golden Company. The Golden Company was founded by legitimized Targaryen bastards who were exiled from Westeros. Their entire existence has been about one goal: returning home and reclaiming the lands. and reclaiming their lands. Every contract they've taken, every war they've fought has been in service of building the resources and reputation they'd need to eventually come back to Westeros. And now they're finally here, but they're not serving the Targaryens, they're serving the woman who overthrew them. So what happens when the Golden Company discovers that Daenerys Targaryen, the rightful heir to the throne, is in Westeros with 3 dragons and an army? What happens when they learn that Jon Snow is actually Aegon Targaryen, another legitimate heir? These mercenaries have dreamt of serving the Targaryens their whole lives, and now they have 2 of them right here, leading the largest army ever assembled. The Golden Company might honor their contract with Euron, or they might see an opportunity to finally achieve their true goal by switching sides. Either way, Cersei has paid an enormous amount of money for an army that might not fight for her when it matters most. Now we reach the ironic end. The Lannister words aren't "hear me roar," that's what they want you to think. Their real motto, the one Tyrion repeats constantly, is "a Lannister always pays his debts," and that motto might be exactly what destroys them. Tywin understood that debt could be a weapon. He used it to bind the Iron back to the Lannister cause, ensuring they'd never abandon him. But Cersei, in her desperate need to prove herself superior to her father, paid off that debt. She threw away his greatest bargaining chip because she didn't understand why he'd kept it in the first place. She thought she was showing strength. She thought she was proving that Lannisters always pay their debts. But what she actually did was free the Iron Bank to abandon her. She eliminated their only reason to keep her alive. And the irony is perfect. The Lannisters will be destroyed by paying their debts. Cersei's fatal flaw. Cersei Lannister is not stupid. She's cunning, ruthless, and capable of brilliant tactical thinking. But she has one fatal flaw. She cannot see past tomorrow. She makes decisions based on immediate advantage, without considering long-term consequences. She solves today's problem without thinking about what problems she's creating for next week, next month, even next year. Paying off the Iron Bank felt like a victory. It felt like power, but it was the beginning of the end. Because now the bank is free to support Daenerys. Now the Golden Company might betray her. Now she's out of money just as winter brings famine to King's Landing. Now she's surrounded by enemies with no allies and no resources. Cersei thought she'd won. She thought she'd secure her position and prove herself worthy of the throne. What she actually did was guarantee her own destruction. And when it all comes crashing down, when the walls close in and her enemies surround her, she'll have no one to blame but herself. Because the downfall of the Queen wasn't caused by her enemies. It was caused by her own arrogance, her own short-sightedness, and her desperate need to prove she was smarter than everyone else. She wasn't. So here we reached the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys would like to see more Game of Thrones content, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And let me know in the comments if you'd like me to explore a certain character or a certain theory. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.